So today, or in this panel, we're going to talk about sustainable innovation. And I have two really, really interesting panelists that I would like to introduce you to, and that's Markus Linder and Eva Sommer. Welcome both. I think we can start with a brief introduction now, and I'm going to tell the audience a little bit about yourself. So Eva is, I'd say, quite a legend in the food tech space. Right now she's running a company called Firmify, and I actually loved how you described it on the website. You domesticate microorganisms to build a super simple and fully automated production platform to address the issue of large-scale milk production. Before that, you were building a clean tech startup called Piece of Meat, which actually sold just 1.5 years after launching. And you even started your food tech journey when you were just about 15, more or less, right? Because that's when you started cutting out meat. And you traveled to over 50 countries to explore what plant-based products taste like. So you've been in this space for a really long time. And Markus, you also have a knack for that part of the world, mostly when it comes to biodiversity. You are currently the founder and CEO of Inoko. Inoko provides retailers, brands, consumers with scientific data on environmental, social, and biodiversity impacts of grocery products. You're not just a founder, but you're also an investor, so you kind of are on both sides of the table. You run an investment vehicle called Triple Impact Ventures, and you invest in early-stage startups tackling the triple planetary crisis, so I'm sure we're going to go into that a little bit. And before that, you co-founded a startup, Zovu, as a student yourself back in 2006, which grew to a over $200 million funded startup, and 150 people, I think, during your time when you grew the company, so really exciting in the digital AI space. I myself am the co-founder of Tidal Impact. We're an impact advisory and investment firm, and I also built the Sigma Squared Society, which is a global network for the most ambitious founders in their early 20s. So I really like to keep things, I like to get right to the gist of the story, and so we're talking about sustainability, impact, sustainable innovation, and I would like to hear from both of you what that moment was when you decided that you would dedicate your career to sustainable innovation or sustainable technology. So Eva, maybe we can start with you.
Yeah, so to be honest, sustainability was not that much under my radar, but I'm vegan since more than 80 years, so I'm basically an animal rights activist. And I started to develop this, or I studied biotechnology, and then it came very natural that I developed technology that is reducing the harm on animals. And by coincidence, it's very sustainable as well. So when we compare our technology, our cheese proteins that come from our technology, we reduce CO2 emissions like 80–90%, which is very convenient for us because, yeah, that's really like a key differentiator to the current technology that is out there. And I think you always have to be sure, like, what do you want to achieve? Is it sustainability? Do you want to, what drives you? And for me, it's really taking out animals from the industrialization. So this is key for me. And sustainability, I see that this is like one of the major drivers right now to make it happen, because our customers, they are not sustainable at all, and they want to change the future, and they can't because cows are just zero sustainable, and it's very convenient that we meet this expectation of our customer in terms of that as well. They don't really care that much about animals, that's fine, but they care about sustainability. They really have to meet the CO2 goals as well, and we can support them with that, and I'm very happy about that we meet these expectations.
And I love the fact that you've been plant-based for 18 years. Like, I myself have been plant-based for 7 years, and I already feel like 7 years ago, it was quite difficult to do everything in that way. So 18 years ago must have been quite a journey for you.
Yeah, so in the beginning, it was like people who were vegan were mainly people who didn't wear shoes, like crazy people. And it just changed a few years ago. Like the perception of vegans is, I think it's okay now. They're still a little bit crazy, but it's okay. But back then it was very difficult. Like I grew up in Austria in the countryside and there were no vegan products. So you just ate potatoes and vegetables, whatever was there, mostly fries and salad when you went to a restaurant. And it has changed a lot. Like now almost everyone in our generation is flexitarian. So they're not 100% vegan, but they're flexitarian and they really ask for these products. And there was a huge shift like 5 to 10 years ago, and now it's quite easy. But still, there are so many bottlenecks, like there is no good vegan cheese, and we had to change that. Like when you go to the supermarket and you try vegan cheeses, most of them don't taste good, and they're just fat and starch, and it's not healthy, and people don't like it. So we had to change that, and this is why we are working on this project.
I agree. I'm looking for a good vegan cheese alternative, for sure. Marcus, what about you?
Yeah, as you mentioned, I founded my first startup, Suvu, back in 2006 here in Vienna, Austria. After 12 years, decided to bring in a scale-up CEO, could hand over to him at a triple-digit growth rate, and then took a year off. And during that year, my family and I, we bought an RV, like a mobile home, and we traveled through the Nordics, what you would do after, starting a startup and then getting out of it. And it was a very defining time for me because I learned a lot about the climate crisis, learned a lot about the biodiversity crisis. My second son was on his way at that time, and I just saw, all those things going on out there that simply don't look good at the moment. I mean, if you project 30, 40, 50 years into the future, once my kids will be grown up, things don't look very promising. So it became very clear to me that this is the next challenge I want to put myself into. Initially got started as an impact investor, angel investor, now through Triple Impact Ventures. So all climate, biodiversity founders, please reach out to us. But then also decided that I wanted to start my second startup, maybe Inoko, in that space and really try to make a difference in the food space. Based on the realization, and you already touched upon it, that our food has a massive impact. So our food is responsible for 1/3 of the global greenhouse gas emission. It's responsible for 70% of the biodiversity loss. And obviously, it has a huge impact on our health. And that's what we're here to change. And very excited to be able to contribute to that space.
Thanks, Marcus. And I hear those stories so many times when people take a sabbatical and then their whole life changes and they decide to completely shift their life. So I'm looking forward to taking a sabbatical myself.
You're already in the right space. You don't need to take a sabbatical.
I know.
Let's get the climate crisis fixed first.
True. Both of you are working with technologies. And obviously we know that with not just AI and blockchain and all of these things, but we need technology to solve the big problems in the world. Aoife, in the clean meat, alternative protein space, there's so much science, right, that goes into it. Can you share some of those moments where the scientific discoveries were rather counterintuitive? Were there any moments that you had?
Yeah, so I see that so often. The problem or the benefit here with our technology is that it already exists partly. So we use biotech extensively for the biopharmaceutical industry. The problem here is that the product is extremely expensive. So you produce something in very small scale, it's like 1 gram and it already costs millions of euros. So production cost does not matter a lot. Now we are in a space where we produce at 10, 12 euros per kilo. So we really need to look at the process at every single step to make it economically interesting. Our customer, they don't want to pay a premium for it. They want to be sustainable, but still have the same comfort and the same price area. So we need to look top down, like where do we need to go? And it's really 10 euros per kilo, and it's extremely difficult when you have a bioprocess involved that is a very complex system and which you have to develop over several years. So many companies take the bottom-up approach. So they use the same technology that is out there from the biopharmaceutical industry and then figure out, okay, we only use 10, 20% of the CapEx investment, which covers 1/3 of the price in the end. and they will never reach unit economics. So that's really dangerous. So you work several years on a project and then you figure out, okay, you will never make it happen. So it looks promising, but you develop the wrong technology. It's like dedicated for another space, but not for food. So we have to be very cautious of how we spend money that we get from venture capitalists. We are not able to sell anything right now, so really live from money from venture capitalists in the entire space, clean meat, but also precision fermentation, and we need to be very cautious what we do develop, that we don't reach a point where we say, okay, our technology is just not feasible, we cannot market it because we don't know we'll reach the unit economics. So we really took the top-down approach. We looked how we can make the process as lean as possible and how we can increase the utilization of CapEx. And this is why we developed a continuous system. And our system is also not controlled by human beings, which is also very expensive. Human capital is not easy to find and very expensive. And we replace it with digital twins. So our process is not controlled by humans, but really technology. And I think that's a key differentiator.
Yeah. I remember, because I was studying at the Maastricht University, I think they developed the first lab-grown burger patty, which was sold for 250,000 euros. So I thought back then, oh, when are we going to get that down to like 5 euros? And it also, what you said reminded me of, I believe it was Albert Einstein who said, we can't solve the new problems with the same old thinking, right? And that would apply to your sector as well. Just one last question, which is about Firmify. So I see so many new dairy companies pop up every day that say they make new types of cheeses. So what makes yours different? And did you bring us samples?
Unfortunately, I didn't bring samples. You can come to our lab if you are hungry for cheese. But so I have a co-founder who is extremely experienced. So he is working in the space for like more than 30 years, and he really knows how to troubleshoot. So we were able to achieve our milestone extremely fast. And this is something sometimes missing in startups. They are not able to hire people who are very experienced because they are very expensive, and it's not so easy to get them into the room. And I'm very lucky that I have this person who developed this technology over many decades and has all the knowledge we need to make it happen. So that's one of our key differentiators as well. I'm very lucky.
Amazing. Marcus, I really like that you're both on the founder-investor side. So you must be seeing so many companies, so many technologies. What do you think? We all know about great potentials out there, but what would you say are some limitations right now that you're observing? Or we love talking about the concept of moonshot companies as well. So what's a type of maybe moonshot technology that you'd love to see, but that may still need a bit of time?
I mean, first of all, if we don't solve the climate crisis, everything else won't matter. So this is hugely important that we really make progress here and that we manage to decarbonize our lives. And a lot of decarbonization is tied to energy. So there are huge challenges from, energy storage, energy transmission. We need new infrastructure. We need to store energy over time to balance out renewables and so on. So there's huge challenges in this space. Obviously, there's huge challenges also. I would say the biggest challenge that we have in that whole puzzle is us, human beings, because it takes us so long to change. It's so hard to adapt our behavior, and I think we are really the biggest challenge in this whole puzzle, and we will, as individuals, make it or break it. And that's something that I'm on the one hand, technology gives me hope, and that's why I keep going, because I'm super excited about all those cool startup founders that are working hard on trying to mitigate the worst. On the other hand, I need to confess, on some days, seeing how people, continue with life as usual and don't care, obviously, can be depressing at times. Then I need to go back and look at pitch decks and look at the progress that we're making at Inoko to overcome those situations. But I think there is lots of great initiatives going on from the regulatory point of view. So obviously, we all have to kick in. We as consumers need to change our behavior. We need to drive the change. Governments need to drive the change. Companies need to drive the change. And it's exciting to see that many of these are acting, not fast enough, not enough, but moving into the right direction. Moonshot ideas. I just received a pitch deck on the weekend from a bunch of SpaceX and Hyperloop One engineers. They basically want to extract raw materials from the moon and then build a sunshade between the sun and Earth. I mean, this either they smoke too much or they're genius. I don't know the answer yet. But I mean, there are real huge moonshot ideas out there. Some more realistic than others. But that gives me a lot of hope that very smart people out there are really thinking about how can we solve that problem? How can we mitigate the problem or mitigate the worst? And yeah, that in the end gives me a lot of hope.
Are you going to invest in them?
We still need to take a closer look at it.
But I love what you mentioned, because basically what you're saying is that there's a behavior change that almost needs to precede all of the other developments, right? So thinking about that, when you look at a company, how do you judge the company? Because there's a mindset element, right? A consciousness element, and there's the actual technology. How do you look at the founder themselves?
Yeah, we invest at early stage, so pre-seed, seed, latest Series A. And here it's a lot about the founders. You know, I want to see them be passionate. I mean, being a founder, I know very well from my own experience, you're basically punched into the face every day and you need to, you know, you fall down and you need to stand up again. That's the reality of being a founder. And you can only overcome those daily punches and stand up again if you have, you know, a lot of vision, a lot of conviction, if you have been able to build a great team around you that really shares that vision. And that's the only chance you have to really overcome all of these obstacles. And this is kind of what I really look in founder, or what we look at founding teams. Is this passion there? Are they smart? Are they going to circumvent all these challenges out there? And yeah, obviously other topics are market size, technology, what's their background, what experience do they have? But also in the end, and Eva, that's something you mentioned already, the truth is very few people are willing to pay a green premium for more sustainable products. So we invest into solutions where we see the perspective that that solution becomes cheaper and better than the incumbent solution. And I think that was a very hard learning for me to learn, but a very important one, and that's really key in terms of our investment thesis.
You mentioned that part of the founder's journey is being punched in the face over and over again. When were you punched in the face when you built your companies? Maybe Eva, you can talk about some of your challenges, some of your failures along the journey.
Yeah, as already mentioned, I had a company before and I didn't know the co-founder well, or not at all. So during this time when I was asked if I want to be co-founder of the company, I lived in Bali. And then I moved spontaneously to Belgium, a completely new country. And yeah, in the beginning it was fine, but in some point our co-founder team was not really in good terms. And it's really a difficult phase because you already built something together, there is no cash out, so what are you going to do? You are there alone, so you're on your own and nobody really can help you. So you cannot ask your mom, like, how can you solve this issue? Because that's really complex problem, and usually you don't speak about those things. Like, you always want your startup to be in good terms. You don't speak bad about your baby. So there are almost no people you can speak about these things. So I think as a startup founder, it's extremely important to really check, am I able to work with this person? Are we complementary? And also build a network with other founders to discuss this issue. I think you need to learn that you can discuss about it openly because you're not alone, you're not the only one who has this issue. So Markus, for example, is also one of our investors, and if these things should happen again, now I know, okay, I can call him and then we solve this issue and I'm not alone. And this is a very important learning. Really build up your network and find people you trust and just discuss problems openly. I think that's a very important thing to do. And there are always people who are able to discuss this problem with you. You shouldn't be ashamed for failure, for example. I think there's no point in that. You can solve problems, but sometimes you can't, and then you need to find a solution. I was very lucky because we got an offer for an acquisition, so I was able to walk out on a good terms. So yeah, lucky, but not everyone is in this position. You need to make the best out of every single situation.
Yeah, and I think most startups fail because of co-founder issues, right? Because they break apart and they don't align with each other. So
it's like being married and you
Yeah.
are just not able to walk out.
yeah, you have to sign a prenup, ideally. What about you, Marcus? So what are some of the, because you actually just raised a round, right, with Inoko, so congratulations on that. But I'm sure it wasn't always easy. So
No, it wasn't
us.
always easy. It isn't easy. It's a huge challenge, and it's massive opportunities usually come along with huge challenges, and I mean that's just what the life of an entrepreneur is about. Like getting into those challenges and trying to keep a sober head, and overcoming the challenges that have been put in front of you. In terms of failures or mistakes, what's really interesting, and I just realized that now during the press release, that Inoko is my second startup, where I initially started with a B2C business model, and then we pivoted towards B2B, because at my first startup, Suvu, we also started with a B2C model. And afterwards you ask yourself, come on, why didn't I right away go into B2B? I mean, there were reasons for it, because we thought that our customers now, the retailers, would rather sue us instead of wanting our technology and our data. So it was kind of a surprise factor. But yeah, you make millions of mistakes every day. But I agree with you, Eva, that it's so important that you have a culture where you talk about the issues, where you have an open communication with your co-founders, but also with your team, where everyone is able to talk about mistakes, about strengths and weaknesses. This is just the most important thing at all, that you are aware of your own strengths, but also aware of your weaknesses. I have many of those. And that you build a team. Nicola, our head of people, is in the audience. He's just nodding. Thanks, Nicola. So it's important that you build the team around you to compensate for your weaknesses and to really make sure that you can use your strengths to the extent possible, but have people around you who really cover up your back for those areas where you're not that good at.
And since you also invest, do you have cases perhaps in your portfolio where you see founders making mistakes or going through big challenges, and where you think, oh wow, if they had done things differently, or if you could have maybe told them earlier that they could have gone a different way, or maybe it's all just going really well?
Lucky us. At the moment, I'm very happy with our portfolio. Andre, who is my investment manager, is doing an amazing job, because I'm only, a weekend investor. We have our investment committee meeting Sunday night at 8:30 p.m. because during the week I'm fully focusing on Inoko. So he did an amazing job in identifying great startups like Firmify and preparing the decision. But I really don't, at the moment, wouldn't have a startup where I would say, hey, they're really on the wrong track, we are worried here. In contrary, I'm very excited about how fast they're able to, have been raising now a Series A round. One of our first investments already raised Series A. Another one just raised the seed round. So there's really progress that we're seeing, which is very exciting. And but for sure, all founders make lots of mistakes. And even as a founder who has founded a company before, you obviously make lots of new mistakes, but sometimes you also make the same mistakes again. We're all humans, and sometimes a bit slow with learning, me at least.
But mistakes are important because we learn, we become wiser, right?
Hopefully.
Hopefully, yeah. There's one thing that it's a sort of dynamic that I think a lot about, which is impact and profit, or some people may say impact versus profit. So I'd say both of you are working on really important topics in the sustainability space. But when confronted with this question of how do you make money while making impact, or can you have both at the same time, how do you react to that?
Yeah, so we are not profitable yet, but we will be, and we have a very scalable business, so I think that's key. We live from venture capital money. If we won't reach this point where we might be profitable in a few years, it's not a venture case, and we are not an NGO, so it's really key to, to set up the business model that you can really have a return for your investors and for yourself, and I think that's really key. If you set it up the way that you have no return, I think it will be very difficult. Right now there are several climate tech startups which will never be profitable, but they work on CO2 certificates, for example. That's another area, but you need to be profitable. Otherwise, it's not a business case, it's a hobby.
I think people who ask that question haven't realized the world we live in at the moment. After the digital transformation, we're now in the midst of the transformation towards a more sustainable future, which means all big companies, all big corporates need to go through this transition to be able to succeed in the long term, to achieve their goals. And startups who are able to help them on that journey will become very valuable and will become very successful and will become very profitable. So it's like, asking somebody at the beginning of the digital transformation, do you really think it makes sense to invest into those weird digital startups out there? I mean, Tesla is one example, one early example, they're not really a sustainability startup in that sense, but they managed to basically force an entire industry within a couple of decades to completely go onto this net zero journey, right? They really built up the market, they proved that it worked, and they are now one of the top 10 market capitalization companies out there. And they just surpassed like $1 trillion in market capitalization last year. So we only invest into startups that have an impact, but also startups that can be scalable around the globe fast. Because we believe it's nice if you invest into small local initiatives that might have a positive impact regionally, but where we can add value as an investor is really that we help them to scale out, to go global. And this is where the impact happens. If you really manage to show impact in one country and then extrapolate that and bring that around the globe. And this is why we only focus on startups who really have that potential. And therefore, in our case, impact and financial returns must go hand in hand, because a startup that doesn't generate the financial returns just won't be able to scale, won't be able to achieve that global impact.
Yeah, that's what I also always say, because people still often think about impact or sustainability as a philanthropic activity, but it really isn't anymore. And if a company makes impact and money at the same time, then it grows bigger anyway. So 100% agree. We've got 1 minute left. So I'm sure there are founders in the audience and many other people who are really into the space. What's one single piece of advice that you give to people in the sustainable innovation space who might want to found a sustainable venture one day, or perhaps are already on the journey?
Yeah, I would suggest not being too stubborn. So you might have a good idea about your business model and so on. Really listen to your customer, what they tell you, what they really need, because they will make it happen. Otherwise, it will be very frustrating. Just listen to everyone who is giving you advice and then go for it. Try different things, try different models with different customers, and then you figure out what they really want. I think that's key.
5 seconds, there is no green premium. Don't believe that anybody will pay more for your product just because it's more sustainable. You need to find a way to, reach the same pricing that the incumbents have today and the same level of comfort. Then you have good chances to make it.
Thank you both. Thanks for listening.
Thank you very much.